Yeah. Well, and that's where that applied empathy really comes to bear in that, and you mentioned it before, meeting people where they are and understanding that simply because it seems like a great idea may trigger that very primal sort of response in people. And everyone's coming from a different set of life experiences. Everyone has a different reaction to that risk. And so really being empathetic and meeting people where they are, as opposed to trying to force them into where you want them to be, it creates much more durable change and much more effective change. You see this a lot, I find, with software implementations, that a new software package is rolled out. A certain group of people are going to worry about their jobs.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week, I bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Lincoln Bleveans. He has been an executive in the global energy industry for nearly 30 years and currently leads Stanford University's mission-critical operations and world-leading innovation in sustainability and resilience, utilities, and infrastructure. He is a committee member of the Board of Oversight of the SLAC National Accelerator Laboratory and is active as a keynote speaker, as a podcaster, and as a mentor and board member for technology startups in North America, Europe, and India. Congrats on your impressive career and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show because the importance of empathy, and not only empathy, but applied empathy in leadership today is such an obvious need that for a lot of organizations. And I think someone who's worked with companies around the world can really have some great insights onto how applied empathy makes a difference when you're trying to lead an initiative. So I'd love to hear more about how you recommend leaders go about applying empathy better.
Yeah, I think it's a subject that we literally can't talk about enough. Empathy in particular is something that I love what you said about H to H. That's exactly what it is. No matter how big or how small a transaction or a relationship might be, it's always H to H. And human beings are driven by empathy in the same way that they're driven by financial compensation and status, in my opinion. And that's where it's so critical to apply that to your organization and to the way that you deal with people. People are, I think about kind of two sides of the same coin. On one side, you've got technology, which is obviously moving very, very fast, is extremely complex, but let me rephrase that, is extremely complicated. Whereas the other side of the coin is the human beings. And that's where the complexity comes in. Human beings are the hard part, no matter how complicated the technology is. The complexity of the human being is always the challenging part. And if it's not challenging, you're probably not digging deeply enough.
Yeah, all the reports, there's a bunch of them last year about, especially the MIT one, about the number of AI initiatives that were failing at companies. And it almost always is a factor that it's the people management and the leadership team that's trying to implement these changes, not empathizing, understanding where their teams are coming from or how their people feel about the changes, and that lack of connection, not understanding just how messy and how much gray area there is in the human experience, that if you're trying to oversimplify the process or assume it's going to be this linear progression, then you're in for a rude awakening because of how irrational and emotion driven and complicated people are to deal with it. It's not even on like the individual level. When you have a group of people, all the social dynamics and egos and status and positioning and the established habits people have, it's a lot more complicated. And so if you don't have that empathy of going in and approaching it from, let me understand and meet people where they're at, and so I can understand them first, and that will inform the approach we need to make with any sort of leadership initiative or changes, then you're almost guaranteed to fail, because people are not going to respond in a way that you expect if you don't start by understanding them.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think, people are, well, human beings are ultimately self-preserving creatures. And so anytime there is a change in our environment, we react to it with, oh my goodness, how will, whenever there's a change in the environment, there's always a reaction from people. How does this affect me? Is this a risk to me? And people are just at a very gut level are very resistant to change. And that's why change management, in my opinion, is the new superpower in today's world. That, I talk to a lot of students in my day job here at Stanford, and I encourage them to do two things before they graduate. One, take a project management course, and two, learn change management. That to me is the superpower of this unprecedented and rapidly changing time that we live in. If you ignore change management, you're not going to get change, or at least effective change.
Yeah, and the process for understanding like that, or applying change management and really understanding what the stages are of it, and being able to recognize where an individual on a team is at in those different stages, because not everyone's going to go through all those stages at the same rate and all have slightly different experiences. And so that being able to recognize and communicate the stage someone's at, and then react accordingly or respond accordingly is I think one part of the process that, again, it's a little extra layer of complexity that most people don't realize, that the whole group is not going to move through at the same rate. And
yeah,
if you're not able to adapt yourself or those around you to change, then yeah, that's a big liability for any organization, with how quickly things change and how quickly people need to be able to build new habits and adapt. And well, understanding that, yeah, like you said about human nature, is that our brains associate change with death, basically, because like we're still wired for life on the Serengeti and like in hunter-gatherer tribes like 100,000 years ago, where changing your location could mean interacting with a predator or getting like injured or something that could be life-threatening. And so even though most of the changes we deal with in our day-to-day life are not that dire, our brains are still wired to respond that way. And so there's especially when it's like committing to a big change, there's this 20 seconds of just absolute terror where the brains are like, oh my gosh, we're going to die. But once you push through that and commit to it, and the brain goes, oh, we're not dead, I guess this is okay, like the fear goes away. But just getting through that and understanding that that's what people are feeling when you're asking them to make a change to the way they work or any sort of disruption to their normal habits. It really is important to understand what's going on in people's heads, often in ways that they're not even aware of what's going on themselves.
Yeah. Well, and that's where that applied empathy really comes to bear. in that, and you mentioned it before, meeting people where they are and understanding that simply because it seems like a great idea may trigger that very primal sort of response in people. And everyone's coming from a different set of life experiences. Everyone has a different reaction to that risk. And so really being empathetic and meeting people where they are, as opposed to trying to force them into where you want them to be, it creates much more durable change and much more effective change. You see this a lot, I find, with software implementations, that a new software package is rolled out. A certain group of people are going to worry about their jobs. Am I being automated away? And that needs to be dealt with. That they need to be convinced that they're safe, if that's the case. But then you run into changing work processes, which people find a lot of comfort in their work processes. They find a lot of safety, a sense of irreplaceability in their work processes and the knowledge that goes along with that. And to the extent that, say, this new software system disrupts that, that's going to need to be addressed head on. And unfortunately, that it doesn't happen all the time. And that's why you find a lot of organizations, especially big organizations, with orphaned software packages that were implemented with great fanfare and then nobody used. People just work around them in the way that they've always done things. And of course, that's inefficient in and of itself, but you also don't get the efficiency that you're hoping for with the software package. So it's kind of a double loss there. And it all comes back to that two-sided coin of technology and human behavior, and really making change management a core part of the process, as opposed to an add-on or a cherry on top. So but I think we get, as human beings, we geek out over the technology, and we think that is going to be exciting enough to bring everybody along, and it's just not the case.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to changing human behavior, it's all about building and establishing new habits in people, is my understanding. Yeah. That's why like New Year's resolutions rarely work, is because people make a big grandiose goal and don't actually change their daily habits and routines. And so they don't actually make any progress towards it. And so the same thing with implementing a new piece of technology or a new software tool. You can do a kickoff like workshop where people learn about the tool and here's what the change is happening. And then if you just have them go back to their normal routines and expect them to change their own habits and start using this thing without any sort of guidance or repeat reinforcement of the new behavior you want them to adopt, it's just not going to happen, because they're already dealing with so many other things that their brains are going to default to the habits they've already established, because that's the path of least resistance. And our brains are wired to be efficient and save energy and not put more effort into things than we have to. And so unless part of your change management involves long-term or longer term than you'd expect, habit building check-ins and making sure people are actually using the tool and making it part of their workflows, and that it's establishing new behavior that's going to stick, then yeah, you're destined for those orphan software issues where your company invests a bunch of money into this thing that's not getting used and ends up wasting a bunch of money on that. And then you're also like the company you bought it from doesn't get the like a renewal, and it kind of all is a big waste of time and money for everyone, because you weren't able to build the right habits and the people that need to use this thing to get for your company to get the value from it.
Yeah. That's a great summary.
So when you're working with people on, or like leaders on how to start applying empathy better, is there a starting point you find leads to the most success, or kind of a recommended way people start applying this?
I find, for me, the core of all of this is psychological safety in the organization. And so you really get back to, can people speak up? Can people express opinions that are contrary to what they're hearing from their colleagues, what they're hearing from their higher ups in the organization? And so it really, if you don't start with that core of psychological safety, I think everything you do on top of that is severely discounted by the people that you're working with. So really starting with psychological safety, and a big part of that, in my experience, is actually getting to know your people and making human contact, not business contact, but human contact, a regular feature of the work environment. Not only one-on-ones with your direct reports, but probably skip level one-on-ones with their direct reports. And then mostly just making your presence felt, being around, being available to talk to people, saying hello to people, setting the tone as a leader that this is a safe environment in which to be creative, because creativity is equals risk. And if you're going to get that creativity out of your people, and they're going to be a lot happier working in that environment than a command and control environment, getting that creativity, establishing that safety, and then when you roll things out, when you make those changes, first of all, you're starting in a place of safety. So the perceived risk for your people it can be much lower than in a more traditional command and control environment. But also, you know where their touch points are, where their pain points are. And they have a confidence in you that you will take those pain points into consideration when making these decisions. So for me, it sounds so simple. I guess it's management by walking around, but really just being present and being human and approachable. I always say that the only reason I can do what I do is because 100 other people do what they do, up and down and across the org chart. Bringing that mindset to the workplace, bringing that vibe, to the workplace. That to me is the core of it. Make it safe, and everything flows from there.
Yeah, I liked what you said about the psychological safety being the foundation of it, but also that mindset of you can only do what you're doing because other people are out there doing what they're doing, and that it's a group effort, and that everyone is winning when everyone wins when each other wins, like the individuals win when the group wins, and that it's better to have that collaborative mindset instead of an adversarial one. And it's something that when it's done right, like you said, you have these deeper, more personal connections on top of the business ones that allow for that creativity and that those questions and the connection that leads to better business outcomes, and people that are motivated by more than just the paycheck to actually contribute and go the extra mile for the company, because it's more than just a job. There's this sense of community and belonging that people need on as basic a psychological level as food and water and air and all that sort of stuff. Is we want that connection, that part of being something bigger, and that brings that psychological safety that people need to be successful and happy and have a good human experience.
Yeah. Yep. No, very true. Very true. I think it all, as simple as it sounds, it's hard to do, but it all starts with simply being human with each other. And often that's difficult for people. They walk into the door of the office or the door of the factory or wherever they're walking into, and you feel a little bit less human. I think you feel a little bit more task-oriented, more transactional, but the ability to pull that back and make things more relationship-based and more human, that to me is the core of all of it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Lincoln. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection Podcast, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you want to learn more about myself or Lincoln, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.